Good evening, everyone. My name is Vadim Perlovsky, and we are back with another amazing tasting with the Virtual Tasting Society. Joining us today is Virginia Distillery Company. From Virginia is Amanda Beckwith. We are tasting with the Los Angeles Whiskey and Spirits Guild, and David Donahue is the president of said guild, and he's here to say a few words. David?
Thank you very much, Vadim. Really appreciate it, and everything that the Virtual Tasting Society has put together for us over the last year plus, particularly during COVID. Now that we've gone well over 90 virtual tastings, I think that we're all veterans of this process. I think just looking around, most everybody is a regular. But I know that you'll talk about best practices for this virtual tasting with Amanda. Amanda, I'm really excited about this. We've heard a lot of wonderful things from Brandon, from other people that are familiar with it. I am not. I hadn't heard about it until Vadim brought it to us. And these are one of those kind of virtual tastings that I really look forward to, because we're having an opportunity to taste through a distillery's new expressions. And it is a great opportunity. So thank you very much for working with Vadim to bring us this event.
My pleasure.
Yeah, welcome everyone. I see all familiar faces, so I'm not gonna talk about best, to keep yourself on mute unless you're talking and all that jazz. Everybody here knows what to do. They're all, as David said, veterans of the process. We're excited to get started. We love deconstructions, and it's really cool that Virginia Distillery does reconstruction or deconstruction. It's just as you thought of it before, nobody had to tell you to do it. It's pretty great. We did post the order that we're going to be tasting in the chat. We're going to start with the bourbon cask. Then we're going to do the sherry, the cuvee, which I don't think we've done a cuvee cask yet, or if we have, it's definitely been rare. So bourbon cask, sherry cask, cuvee, and then the flagship, which combines those three, and then finish off with the port cask. It looks like I did mislabel the name. It's Virginia Distillery Company, not Distilling Company, right?
Correct.
Okay. So it is Virginia Distillery. And yeah, the floor is yours. Take it away. We're excited to learn all about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I am very passionate about American single malt, so the chance to talk to you all just kind of makes my night. So a little bit about me and the company. I am the oldest employee at Virginia Distillery Company by duration, not age. We've been distilling single malt since 2015. We're owned by the Moore family, so we're the largest independently owned American single malt distillery. And our motto has been kind of twofold. First, old world meets new. So we've taken a lot of techniques that we learned from our Scottish mentors, and we got to work with some of the best in the biz. I got to train with Jim Swan and Harry Coburn and Andrew Shands, which is all really exciting, and pick their brains for a couple of years. And then also, in addition to that, old world meets new, we're working with a really unique Virginia climate. And then our other motto has been, we let the whiskey tell us when it's ready. And that's been really liberating and fun. So I started out building a tour and tasting program. My background was nonprofit work. I worked at the Virginia Aquarium and helped with admissions there. So after a couple of years of having the visitor center run like clockwork, I moved into, of course, educating not just the internal team, but externally. And then we started to realize we need somebody to be grading the barrels and working on the blending. And I became lead blender in addition to education manager. So it's been a fun journey. And we finally released our first American single malt in 2015. And the first whiskey you're going to taste today is our flagship expression of American single malt. And we knew it was getting ready. We had everything coming together. And then, of course, April 2020, when we had scheduled, we had really entered the first full month of the pandemic. And we were thinking, should we go ahead with this? And we just decided to name the single malt line after a phrase from our founder, George Moore. He always had a saying for every occasion, and one of his favorites was, have the courage of your convictions. And that just kept resonating with us. So we went ahead and did it, and we named our first batch after him, and it sold out in a matter of months. And I quickly had to pivot and start batch 2, and then batch 3, now batch 4. And each batch has gotten larger than the one before. So it's been really exciting to have this. And feel free to go ahead and nose with me as I'm talking. All of the whiskeys you're going to taste tonight are 92 proof. So I would say definitely feel free to do a little drive-by, inhale a little bit. And of course, No chill filtering, no caramel coloring. Our ingredients are so simple: water, yeast, and barley, of course. And we use 2-row spring barley. If you guys have questions at the end, I love questions. You can also put them in chat, and you'll see the tasting order in chat as well. But for me, I was always inspired by a couple things when it came to flavors and whiskey. And I love layers and nuance. I want something a little bit complicated, something that's going to tell a story. And so I definitely recommend taking your time with all the whiskeys as you nose and let it open up. It's going to evolve more and more flavors. I'm a big fan of Japanese single malts, even though sometimes it's Scottish distillate as well. I think they're lovely. And I think you still get notes from fermentation, some really gorgeous esters coming through. The bourbon cask first that we're doing is one of the foundational barrels that we use. So even though our ingredients are so simple, I kind of think of the barrels as this main fourth ingredient. And so roughly 50% of the whiskey that I have aging right now is in former bourbon casks. And you know, a lot of Scotch whiskey is aged in bourbon casks as well. By law, bourbon has to age in new charred oak. So when those distilleries are done, they can't really do anything else with it other than send it on to another distillery. And we're one state over. So it makes a lot of sense for us to develop really good relationships there. So we use entirely Brown-Forman barrels. And so you'll recognize a lot of those barrels when they come in if you come visit us. And so if you're nosing the bourbon cask version of our Courage and Conviction, you'll see a lot of the straightforward notes that you would expect. But because the harsher tannins have been taken out of those barrels, you really do get the malt character. And you get a lot of the esters from fermentation. So for me, I get the vanilla, but banana custard comes through. And when I'm walking through the distillery, going through the fermentation area, and I'm smelling as I walk through this tanks, I get a lot of banana nut bread right now, some apricot notes. So that's definitely coming through as I nose the bourbon cask. And of course, there's the cinnamon spice, a little bit of orange oil for me today. So I would love to hear your thoughts too. Feel free to put any of the notes you're getting in the chat. Again, you guys are pros, so you know how to taste whiskey. I like to do a little priming sip and then go back and let it work its way over my tongue.
So, Amanda, are you guys only doing American single malts, basically?
We only do American single malt, and then we have our VHW line, which is American blended malt. And so the last whiskey you'll taste today is an American blended malt. And we'll get to talk about that too, and taste it, of course. So yeah, we're really passionate about barley. It's my favorite grain. I love it because it does such a great job of converting the enzymes over which you need for the sugar to become alcohol. But also I love the flavor. I think it's really delicate and malty, and I like that character a lot in whiskey. So I definitely like rye spice sometimes. I definitely appreciate a good bourbon, but for me, barley's my jam.
Hey, one of the reasons I was so impressed with these guys, I started following them about 4.5 years ago, was all they were doing and all they wanted to do was American single malt. And I'm sure Amanda will touch on this at one point, but they didn't open up the doors and start making vodka and gin to keep the lights on. They did some other fun stuff. They cared about whiskey, and that was it. So here we are.
That's true. Yeah. Anna had a great question. Also, hi. She asked what type of yeast we use, and we use 2 types. They're proprietary, but the idea behind using 2, which is a little more complicated, is one is the workhorse. It does all that conversion for us. The other one is selected just because we like the flavors that it can help develop. So it's kind of a fun little process that we developed. Our first year of distilling was all about experimentation. We've always used 2-row spring barley. We knew that, and we had an idea of the strains that we wanted to use. But being able to tweak, figure out everything, including the temperature, everything from the strike temps to just how long we wanted the fermentation to last. It was a year of learning and taking a lot of notes and figuring it all out. So the first barrels that we've had since 2015 are still up in the cask house. We pull samples and think about them, and I think they're delicious, but they don't quite fit the flavor profile that we were able to develop by the end of that first year.
So I'm going to have a lot of questions, so tell me to shut up at some point if you have.
No.
So what was so American single malt. All right, cool. I'm noticing that you guys are aged a minimum of 3 years, but we know 3 years in, American climate is not the same as the 3-year minimum in Scotland. Why that 3-year minimum? And I haven't seen the bottles, so this is all new to me. Why do you have age statements on your releases, or?
Absolutely. Oh, I love that question. So I've trained a little bit in Scotland, and you could not be more right. If you've been to Scotland, we have a running joke. January, July, you can pack the same suitcase, especially if you're in the Highlands. I feel like it's always about 45 degrees Fahrenheit, probably a little overcast, chance of rain. Just wear layers, a sweater, it'll be great. And Virginia is crazy. We have been down to 55, 60 at night, and then we're up to 100 in the afternoon. So it's this massive ricochet. So my mentor, Jim Swan, who worked with Cavalon in Taiwan, said, you've got a really similar climate. It's a 4-season subtropical, very humid climate. And so in hot weather, barrel staves expand and soak up the spirit. Cold weather, they contract. So it's this breathing in and out. And that's how this clear distillate takes on the color and flavor and complexity. So if you're distilling and aging in the Highlands, it's spring, summer, fall, winter for that interaction with the barrel staves. So it's very slow, very delicate. Our barrels get a workout. So in the first year, you see the most evaporation. It's always the most intense. And in our first year, we saw up to 12% evaporation from certain.
The double digits. That's high.
Which kind of frightened me. It was one of those, okay, well, we've said we're going to let the whiskey tell us when it's ready. It might be ready pretty soon. We don't know. And I have friends, Jared Hempstead over in Texas at Balcones, and they've got a one loud and proud on their American single malt because that climate in Waco is really, it takes a toll on the whiskey. So for us, I thought, all right, we'll see. We've got sensors in the cask houses. We're taking a look and measuring and seeing how the pockets of humidity are forming and thermal banding. We're learning. Thankfully, things settled down a lot in the second year. So in Scotland, for example, they see about 2% max evaporation from their angel share that first year. And then it goes down to 1% after a decade or two, it can plateau. We are down to 3.5 to 4.5% on average for most of our casks in a year. I still see a lot in the 6 to 8 range. It's very common, and occasionally there's a barrel.
Climate control or anything in the rick houses, warehouses, anything
Not
like that?
a bit.
Okay.
We started out with a dunnage style cask house that could only hold 600 casks, and we grew pretty rapidly. So we started with building 2 larger metal clad cask houses, and so we palletize them there now to save space, except for the sherry casks. They kind of look like a Solera layout in the back, and so each of those can hold 6,000 casks. And so looking at those, learning about the climate, we have a big fan in the back of the 2 larger cask houses, and that's it. That's just to kind of keep the airflow moving and not allow for big pockets of humidity to form. So I like the comment about the mouthfeel and texture for 46% ABV. Something that I had to learn very quickly was because it's so humid, unlike say India, where they have to watch their barrels so quickly, in a matter of a week, that whiskey can turn on them. Because it's so dry, they have a lot of interesting problems. For us, it's the opposite. So in that breathing in and out, not only can the alcohol be evaporating out of a cask, we can be drawing the humidity in and naturally reducing the whiskey in cask. I'd never really experienced that extent of it before. And so for us, I've also learned from my mentor, Nancy Fraley, to do a very slow reduction. And part of that is because you don't want something like saponification to happen to the whiskey. If you've ever had like a really flabby, angular, harsh whiskey, that could be part of the problem. And so when it's time to reduce the whiskey down to, for example, these at 46% ABV, we try to never exceed 1% addition a week, which can mean it can take months to get the whiskey down to where we want it. So yeah, as far as age statements go, some of our products do, some of them don't. We don't have anything under 3 years. So there is that threshold. A lot of our courage and conviction is now above 4 years when it goes into the bottle. So that's nice, but we always stick with whatever the youngest is, of course. So for example, our VHW, that's about, I think the youngest we put in now is like 3.5 years. Great questions. Feel free to say, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, like I said, is the ABV thing always, have you done any cast strength or, single cast bottlings, et cetera? Is there any plans for that kind of thing? Or is this always going to be like this 46 and, batches?
So we've done a couple experimental limited single cask projects. But tomorrow I'm bottling my first single cask release ever, and I'm so excited. It's been something I've been working on for about 8 months. So if I come on here again, we have to do single cask because it's kind of my baby too. The plan is to do a special single cask release every year. So the first year it's going to be the cuvee cask. So I'll have to tell you more about it when we get to that one, because it's my favorite barrel type to work with, hands down. And so, yeah, I love cask strength. I think some of our whiskey is just, it's a crime to take certain barrels and reduce them. So those are the ones that I've been setting aside. And I kind of had a weird formula for our Courage and Conviction single malt. And part of it was inspired by Jim Swan. And he said, it's great to have that foundation of former bourbon casks, but the next cask type that we're going to taste through is the sherry cask. And I'm sure you guys have had your share of the Macallan, for example. A lot of Scotch whiskey can be aged in sherry casks, but typically it's Oloroso or PX sherry casks. He told us you should get some Fino sherry casks, and he had some really great friendships with some bodegas in Spain and Portugal, and so he hooked us up, and we started out with these Fino sherry casks along with a couple experimentals, a lot of Oloroso and a lot of Pedro Jimenez. And so I got nervous for the first couple of years pulling samples from the Fino. I was like, I don't know, I'm getting some nice tropical fruit. That's about it. You know, it's just, it's okay. And then about 2 years ago, I remember I pulled a sample and I got Honey Nut Cheerios. And I just was so excited. I couldn't stop smiling. I think I was an idiot just walking around like, guys. And so this is kind of a fun experiment where we figured out how the sherry casks perform in this subtropical climate, and the Fino really does work. So yeah, I get a lot of really great fruit notes on these casks, but also some of the more nutty complex notes coming in too. PX sherry, everybody knows probably. They create that by taking the grapes, laying them out on mats in the sun. As they dry, that concentrates the sugar. So an ounce of PX sherry has typically 20 times more sugar per ounce than Coca-Cola. So we're talking lots of dried fruit notes, really rich. And then of course, you get the Oloroso, which is the sherry is aged without that protective yeast blanket on top, so no floor. And that means it can become more oxidized and nutty. And then of course, the Fino brings in addition to the tropical fruit, more of those really great malty complex notes that I love as well. So it's a fun, complex whiskey. And I like it too because in this process of having these line extensions, I got to pick out some of my real favorite honey casks to put in. And we just released these 3 line extensions in April, and then really started to expand them in June. So they're pretty new to us, and we've already gotten a minimum of 6 gold medals on each of them. So a couple platinums.
And possibly my most important question is, are you going for, with a American single malt, first an ex-bourbon and now an ex-sherry? If I was to blind these with, say, 5 other random, bourbon and then 5 other sherry scotches from Scotland, are you expecting to, fit right in there in the flavor profile? Like you couldn't tell the difference? Like I would have no idea this is from Virginia, from America, or is there something different you're kind of going for with your flavor profile?
Definitely something a little different. I think that there are classic flavor notes that I love and that they can, stand through and be consistent. Absolutely. I think I approach it from first, I kind of dismiss appearance. We know it looks good. It's clear. It's got a nice color. That I can't really control very much. So I start immediately with the aroma, and I want layers. I want it to open up and continue. I expect people, if they want to add a drop or 2 of water, be able to see. I don't want anything angular. So I have all the call outs to mouthfeel. That's huge to me. I really want something that is going to be pleasant and fun and intriguing. But those layers, I really think it's a balancing act. But something I think about all the time is food. I wake up and I think about food throughout the day, and definitely when I'm in the cask house. So I'm always thinking of the foods that I'm inspired by and how I want this to pair with it. So occasionally I do cocktails. For this line of single malts, I'd say make it really simple, like an old fashioned with, maybe just a few basic ingredients that play really well, or maybe a highball. I have a friend who's a chef and he does a highball with this one, but he sticks it in the freezer for a few seconds and doesn't use any ice so it doesn't dilute. But keeping those things in mind, I think even more intentionally of the foods that I want. So for example, one of my favorite go-tos with this one is baked brie, honey drizzled on top, some candied pecans on the side, Granny Smith apples, like those sorts of flavors. I want something that's going to come in, bring that spice, bring that backbone, and tell you a whole story. And I love sitting down with a dog and a good book by a fireplace with this one. And I'm happy as can be for 2+ hours.
Is this one the sherry, or are we on the sherry now?
We're on the sherry cask. That's correct. So yeah, lots of deep fruit notes, but yeah, I think the sense of place comes in from everything, not just the aroma, not just the palate, the mouthfeel, all of it coming together and telling a story. And it should stand out, but also it shouldn't be something that is jarring. So yeah, best of all.
One of the things that drew me to these guys immediately, and Benno, this kind of goes back to your question as far as flavor profile goes. There are a few bombs on the market, and I love a good sherry bomb. They've got their place, they've got their time, but nothing, and obviously I'm speaking from my own opinion, but nothing that they're doing is a bomb. It's subtle, it's
Right.
perfect, it's balanced. You get, when I'm drinking American single malt, that's what I want to taste. That's exactly what I want to taste. I don't want to think I'm drinking a scotch. I don't want to think I'm drinking Japanese. Obviously all this is under the same umbrella in a lot of ways, but we're talking about sherry cask, bourbon cask, wine cask, and that's not what I'm thinking when I'm drinking it. It just adds layers.
If people ask me all the time, well, what makes a good whiskey? And that's exactly it. I want something that's got nuance and complexity, and layers is that very definition to me. I love these tasting notes.
Okay, I'll pause on the questions for now so everyone else can ask questions.
Price points.
It's your show, baby.
Yeah, all
Go for it,
46%
Benno.
ABV, and price points typically in the 54 to 64 range for our VHW, and then for the CNC in the $80 to $90 range, depending on which one. Yeah. Barrels are probably the most expensive thing. I mean, being a premium single malt, the barley, we use a series of farmers through the North Midwest. We've even grown some of our own, but it is not easy, and I'm not a farmer. And so, yeah, I love the Two Row Spring barley. I think that's really fantastic. And of course, everything as far as just what we do in our water source, which I love, being right where we are is great. So we have a stream and fresh water springs, which is really cool. We use it, of course, to power our stills, to everything from our hot water tank, hot liquor tank on, but of course, reduction water is huge as well for flavor. But honestly, the barrels are the biggest thing. And we have some barrels that cost us $900+ just for one. So that's the price right there. Stills, copper pot stills, they were made in Elgin, Scotland. I love them. My favorite equipment after the stills is our Bovie mill. It was made a century and a year ago. So yeah, 1920. It was made in England for a brewery in Edinburgh. And this type of mill was made so well that the breweries and distilleries that used them would go out of business before even a part needed to be replaced. So we were very lucky to get it in an auction. And so it's our workhorse. It's beautiful. We painted it fire engine red. That's the only change we made to it. And we do 2 tons of malted barley for every run that we do. And we double distill Monday through Friday for most of the year. And so we're pretty large with our scale, but even though that's 2 tons of barley going through the mill, and then we have 3 days fermentation time, and then, a day of distillation and filling barrels, after a full run, we fill 5 to 6 barrels.
So you're not doing any floor malting at your distillery or anything like that?
No, Murphy and Rood in Charlottesville does malting for us, and we're really lucky to have them. They're fantastic. So yeah, David's got our stills in his background. You can see that spiral stair. Above that is one of my office spaces. We call it the Whiskey War Room. So yeah, I wish I could just fly you all magically to the distillery. If you're ever in Virginia, hit us up. We'd love to
We'll
get
wait till the spring or fall to go to Virginia.
Yeah.
So are the
Those are my
line
favorite.
arms the line arms at 90 degrees, it looks like, or is there a slight upward tilt to them? I can't
There's
tell.
a very slight.
Okay.
It's almost exactly 90 degrees. Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Not doing much reflux.
Yes. I think the biggest thing that we've learned, they were made by the Forsyth company. So I've been emailing a little bit with Richard Forsyth, just finding out, okay, we've been using these for quite a few years now. So we're measuring the thickness of the stills and realizing, okay, everything's good so far, but there might have to be times when we will have to eventually replace parts of those, which is a crazy thought. We have very tight cuts. So we started out with just, again, experimenting and seeing what we want. The great thing is we take our heads and our tails and we redistill them. So when we have our process after milling, we go through a mash tun. So we extract that sugary water known as wort, and all that spent grain that's left behind, it's not alcoholic. So we give it to a local farmer, Early Dawn Dairy. So it's free cattle feed for him. And then after our 3 days of fermentation, we have a beer, and it's very much like a Belgian or Saison style. So no hops, really floral, actually more fruity than floral, but there's this really great aroma even then, and I could just drink it as is. But after that, it goes to the wash still, so to the right of David's shoulder. And after that, only about 1/3 comes out of the wash still. So at that point, it's 20 to 30, maybe 32% max ABV. So we call it low wines. And the 2/3 that are left in that still, we call pot ales, and they're really high in nitrogen. So we give them to local farmers for fertilizer. And then we distill again in the spirit still on the left side. And at the height of it, it comes off at like 78% ABV, but we have very tight cuts, and they go into these spirit vats that are in the back left corner, and the heads and tails go down underneath, and then they come back through to be distilled again on our next run. So we always run the two stills at the same time. It's the symbiotic relationship where the wash is in one still and the low wines and faints, or those in the heads, come into the other one. So yeah, I got really geeky there. Sorry about that.
So on that note, was one thing that we could request maybe, because I know we've talked to some distillers about this, and would be cool if you're doing single cask, cask strength, which would be awesome. But what would be the chances? And I would be very curious to see what your new make tastes like.
I love it. Yeah. I love our new make. Harry Coburn is the love of my life, and he's the second mentor that I talk about a lot. In fact, we named our second batch of Courage and Conviction after him, and he's 85 years old. He was the engineer at Bowmore, worked in the industry for decades. And he kept retiring, but couldn't get out of the game. And so Harry told us, first things first, your new make has to be great.
Mm-hmm.
That's the foundation. And we really took that to heart. And I love our new make. I think it's delicious.
And you can't get too geeky with these guys. Just
oh, you're my kind of people.
The first tasting I ever did with them, or maybe it was the second, one of the master distillers spent an entire hour on yeast.
Oh, that was one of the
Nice. Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah. So no, I think our new make is so crucial. It has to be perfect. And from there, of course, yeah, the malts that we use, we definitely have experimented a little bit. I mentioned that we even grew some of our own for a while, which is really fun. So we have a couple experimental casks that we're working on, thinking, okay, when would be the right time to pull these guys out? But for us, being able to work with so many farmers has been huge. I think a lot of people in our industry have seen some big supply chain issues. And because we've had these relationships, we've been covered for everything, which is amazing. From the barrels that we source from both Portugal and Spain, and then of course the Brown-Forman ones, we're just covered. And we'll send an email out saying, hey, this is crazy, but do you happen to have these casks? Of course, here you go. And the same thing has been true for the barley as well. So we get samples, do the thumbs up all the time, and it's been a really cool process to be able to support small local farmers. Yeah, I'm sure you guys are ready for the next whiskey. This is my favorite barrel, and I can't wait to tell you about it. So the next mentor is Dr. Jim Swan, and he was this pioneer of maturation in whiskey. He also grew up in Scotland, and he was helping Cavalon Distillery launched in Taiwan, and a big order had just been placed for barrels to the Speyside cooperage, and it had really depleted the market. And so he said, well, let me think about this for a minute. And he reached out to his friend Miguel Martin and a couple other guys in Portugal. And so this idea formed over the course of a year. And so what these barrels end up being are, in their first life, they held a premium red wine blend. And the word cuvee, of course, means nothing legally. A lot of people connect it to champagne even, but it's that first run of a premium wine. And so that's where we connected to it. But the barrels are emptied out and the inside of the staves are shaved, just a tiny little amount, 3 to 5 millimeters. They're then toasted again, a delicate toast, and given a low, slow char. And then we fill them with our whiskey. And so in the industry, this phrase or term has been coined in reference to the Dr. Jim Swan method, and that's called STR, for shave, toast, and rechar. And so it was something that he started out with these two bodegas doing and connected us. So we were one of the first distilleries in the world to use this method on our casks. And these are my favorite casks to work with. It's quite a process, very expensive, very time consuming, but it's so cool. So if you're nosing this whiskey and getting a lot of red fruit, bright cherry, rich raspberry, chocolates coming through, blood orange, ginger spice, toasted pecan, like this is my jam. And I think we have so many different barrels that show different ways, but these are fun because I feel like every different cask can show chocolate in a different way. It could be everything from dry cocoa to decadent milk chocolate to something more along the lines of, well, I won't say anymore because I feel like you guys should tell me your thoughts. But this is something that I think has put a lot of the Jim Swan distilleries on the map and helped us win a lot of awards. So roughly 25% of the whiskey that we've got aging in our cask houses are in these STR casks.
I mean, you guys were doing it before Killoman made it famous.
Yeah, yep. And yes, we have worked a little bit with Virginia Tech. They have a great program there, and we've sent them some data. We have these sensors in our cask houses where we've been taking readings for a couple of years, so it's been really fun to be able to share some of the findings that we've had with both the soil samples on our grounds, and then also things happening inside our cask houses too. So we've gotten really geeky. And in fact, since you guys are geeks, I'll tell you about a site we put together. It's called batch.info, batch.info. There's no .com or anything. And so you can go, you can put whatever batch it is, whether it's Nancy Fraley, Jim Swan, and you can see how many casks were selected for that batch, things like evaporation rates for those casks, how long each of the barrels aged. So that's really fun. I don't tell many people about it, but we just felt like transparency was really cool, and it's been a fun thing to have out there. So
Yeah, that was one of the things that I noticed in the packaging was that each bottle had a little sticker on it. And it was like a peel here sticker. And that was one of the things I was talking about, that the packaging, there's just so much there that, like, if you don't, at first glance, you don't see it. It's very nicely done. But then when you get into it, you nerd out, you're like, oh, wow, the little medallion comes off, which plenty of bottles have a medallion on them, but this one comes off. And we're sitting there like, I finally, a week after having the bottle in my hand, I found out that there's a description for it that says what these are for. But at first, my wife was like, oh, these are just fridge magnets. You can put them there. I'm like, that's one way to use it. That works. Is there
a salt marker or, yeah.
Okay.
So
I've seen some pictures, and the medallions are different colors, but everything I've got so far, they're all non-painted. Is what's in the market and what we're going to be getting at Wine Warehouse, are those going to be colored?
I'll go grab them.
So the non-colored ones are the flagship Courage and Conviction ones. The colored ones match the colors of the line extensions. So for example, now that we're on the Cuvée cask, it's kind of an aubergine color.
No, everything I've got is just the copper color.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that started with the most recent batch. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think I've got some older stuff then. Okay.
Yes, you do. Okay. Yeah.
What I said was to John Alvarez, one of the first things I said was, it'd be great if you guys did a little something different for each of the medallions, so that people would collect them, like a collectible thing, like people collect
Blanton stoppers
or that kind of thing. So that's awesome. You guys.
Our single cask is going to have those medallions with the number of the barrel on it.
Oh, even cooler.
Yeah. I love that one.
So with batch.info, I was curious, it mentions, your Mountain Spring fed water. The location that you're at, is the water a specific pH? Because we were talking about limestone filtered water having, certain minerals and that helping with the uptake of the yeast and, blocking iron and stuff. Is the water source itself something you looked at? You measured the pH and seen the effect it's had on the fermentation process and everything, or?
Yes. Yeah, we send samples out of our water every month, and we have some of the softest water we've ever seen. It's crazy. Something I'm also really excited about, and this is a weird thing to be excited about, but we take all of our wastewater from cleaning, everything, and we have our own effluent plant out back. So we run it through there, and then it's potable again. We can drink it, and we just let it go back down and make its way into the water table again. So being located, we're in Lovingston, Virginia, which is a tiny one stoplight town. It's between Lynchburg and Charlottesville, Virginia on Route 29. And it's an area that was a dry county until just after a hurricane hit in '69. So there were a lot of illegal distilleries. In fact, there was the largest shot house in the county on our property. And people would swing by after work, and there were 6 illicit still houses in a 2-mile radius, and they would call it getting on their 6-pack if they could hit all 6 before going home. And it was a lot of apple, pear brandy, that sort of thing. But for us, we realized, okay, well, we've got this really great water source. We really like the land. We're on 100 acres, most of it's trees. And the coolest thing I realized is because during the fermentation process, of course, we're creating alcohol. The byproduct is CO2, but because we're out in 100 acres of mostly trees, we're able to just convert it right back to oxygen by pumping it out to where the trees are. And trees that were scrawny little sticks when we started are now just beautiful and thriving. So I love being out in the country for a couple of reasons. Of course, it's gorgeous, but through our process, we've learned a lot of things about how green we are. And after doing a study, we found we consume 15 times more CO2 than we produce in our entire footprint through the things we grow, our location, and just a couple other thoughtful choices that we've made. So that feels really good.
And this is the one you mentioned that you're tomorrow bottling at cask strength.
Yes. Okay.
So when, a couple questions. One, when is it going to be available? 2, we'll be able to purchase it on the website because I noticed free shipping over $100. And 3, Left Turn. Can you tell us just a little about your background, sort of where you came from, what you did, and how you got here? And you can answer that in whatever order, but just curious about all of those things, if that's
Touched on it a little bit, but yeah, I'd like to hear it again.
Absolutely. Well, so the idea with the cask strength is I kept coming across some really, really gorgeous honey barrels. And my goal was to find them to put, of course, in our line extensions, but there were some that I just couldn't bear to reduce. I just thought they're perfect as they are. I don't want to do a thing. And so the idea is every single year, I'll pick a handful of barrels to release single cask strength. And so the first year, to really tell our story, we're starting with these STR or cuvee casks. So yeah, we're going to start bottling them, and we're talking anywhere from the 57 to 62% ABV range. Again, with the humidity, we are seeing some natural reduction because we barrel at 62.5% ABV. So from there, it really is just, seeing what happens in the cask house. So I'm really excited about that. We began, April 2020 was the year that we finally, in the month that we were able to do direct to consumer shipping in the state of Virginia. And we partnered up with an online retailer, Mash and Grape, and that allows us to ship to other places like California, which is really exciting. And we just launched in California. So if you go to our website, vadistillery.com, you can type in your zip code and it'll show you the liquor stores around you that carry your products. So you should be able to see when it becomes available, hopefully by November, our single cask. So it should be bottling this next 2 weeks, the cask that we've picked, and then we'll start shipping them out to places like Park Street in Florida, where we have them held, and then they go through the distributors. So yeah.
We can drill down on that just a little bit more, Amanda. You said there's going to be distribution here to the West Coast.
Yes.
And go to the website, find the shops. Is there going to be enough supply that they're going to be there, or should we focus on buying them through your website and through the online retailer? Would you have a suggestion on how to do that?
So right now, I would say we'll probably post about it in late October, early November. You'll start to see more about it. So you can send it for our newsletter that we send out, but also check out our website, vadistillery.com, or our Facebook page. I can't say for sure, but I have set aside 3 casks for Texas and California in particular. So Mark Baker is our market manager for those 2 states. And so he has accounts in mind that have said they wanted them already. That's all I know. So hopefully we'll know more by October. But yes, we should have enough at least for purchasing online and working through mash and grape. So yeah.
And California just got this stuff. So, I mean, it just hit the warehouse, and up north in our warehouse, we're in the process of moving. So it's there, but technically it's not even there yet. So I know you guys like to get online and, order stuff.
No, we don't ever do that at all.
I know, right?
We
During
don't,
and
we don't
after
go
tasting.
buy out entire inventories at 2.
I know
liquor
you guys
stores.
aren't known for that.
No.
So, but just know this, you will, literally all the reps don't even have samples yet. They're getting them.
That's true.
So you guys will start to see it, in your, favorite liquor store or wherever you go buy stuff. But also don't be afraid. And I know you guys already know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Don't be afraid to say, will you please bring this in?
Don't have the cask strength
Nobody's
right now.
going to turn down business. So feel free to ask.
We're talking about the cask strength, courage, and
We're
conviction.
talking about everything. We're talking about the Virginia Distillery Company as a whole. Every single one of the SKUs.
This is the distributor you're talking to, Benno.
This he knows.
Well, I'm
They
grateful.
want
Yeah,
they want the whole lineup.
Yeah,
Well-
no, but the bottom line is though, it's I'm just saying, you may not see it everywhere now, but you will eventually. Again, just don't be afraid to ask.
yeah, it's exciting to get to California. So I'm very pleased that we're growing because, it's been a crazy couple years, and being able to share our American single malt. You guys have some really cool West Coast single malt distilleries. And I was talking to a friend the other day about how Scotland has these very defined regions, and you know what to expect when you hear, for the most part, they're peated and non-peated islas. They're, lowlands versus, highlands. Of course, you can compare, but the United States is so much vaster, and it has so much different climate to work with. And so being able to show what Virginia has to offer versus, say, Westland or Stranahan's or Balcones, it's just really a different story. So I love that. And I think that having a cask strength whiskey is my most exciting moment, because one, it gets to let you experience the whiskey the way the blender does, and it really shows off what exactly our climate does. So we're really careful with our reductions and our blending, and I think we do a good job. But this is really unique too. So very excited.
Interesting that you mentioned Westland and Balcones, and I'm going to only mention them because you did, because we usually be very respectful. But we heard from Balcones is that they have such a rate of loss through evaporation because it's so hot and so dry. And so hearing you say that you actually can get absorption because it's so high humidity is really interesting, because it focuses, I don't want to say the terroir, but it's the region. The region,
Absolutely.
Humidity, heat, or whether and how, if it's high or low or whatever, really makes a big difference.
That's why people like Garrison Brothers will heat cycle. They want to be able to control that because it's ridiculous.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah, we don't rotate our barrels. We don't do anything like that, but absolutely. And we're part of, this is worth talking about, the American Single Malt Commission. So American Single Malt is such a new category that it doesn't have a recognized identity yet. So the TTB is going to make a ruling this December, and we were founding members along with the crew from Balcones, among others, and Westland. So we've been working together. I thought is a rising tide floats all ships, and I consider those guys my brothers. Sometimes they'll call and be like, "Hey, we got a question," or and it's just this really fun, collaborative spirit. But when we were looking at the standards of identity, our big passion was we need to have quality and transparency so that people, when they hear American single malt, know what to expect. And I love bourbon, don't get me wrong, but it's this big comfort blanket in the United States. And so many people don't understand that whiskey is a big umbrella and there are a lot of different categories. My favorite thing about single malt is it gives you a true sense of place. When people hear single malt, they seem to think it means, one grain, but it's one place, and having that real identity can be such a cool experience. I love it. It's like a visit immediately the moment you take a sip into the people and the place that created that whiskey. And so we were looking at all the different things that we wanted to agree on. And a couple people wanted to have a 3-year minimum age statement, just like Scotland. And we could embrace that. But then looking at Balcones, we realized that's really not fair to them, to handicap them, because their climate is nothing like Scotland, and it's not a level playing field. People used to think older was better, but that's just absolutely not the case. And so, why not embrace and let the whiskey tell us when it's ready? So we don't critique barrels.
Older was just a measure for the amount of time and interaction it had with the wood due to the specific climate that you're aged in. So you need another factor to basically control for that, but it's just kind of almost impossible unless you were to use maybe Angel share as a controlling factor. I mean, I suppose you could come up with some sort of metric based upon Angel share, because that does show interaction and loss. But I mean, that's really the only telling thing, not like how long it's been in the wood. And also then it depends on the type of wood too, because if you're using European oak or American oak, and depending on the thickness of the rings, you're going to get deeper penetration and more interaction than you would with, other types too, right? So
Size of the barrel.
very complicated. Yes,
Absolutely.
So
well said.
Entry proof too, right? And actually, speaking of, what is your entry proof for
62.5?
62.5. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, somebody mentioned Bowman. I love A. Smith Bowman. Yeah. I actually have a good friend who's working there now. So yeah, very cool. We have traded our barrels mostly with local cideries and breweries, but a couple of vineyards. So that's where we focus right now. So yeah, but that's not to say that's not an option down the road. Yeah. Oh, new oak. Yes. I will mention, in addition to single cask, I'm working on a project. We're calling it Capstone right now. And the idea is I have a series of experimental casks, and we're talking 5 to 6 of different types, sometimes a little bit more. And among them, I do have some new oak that we're experimenting with. I like delicate. And one of the guys I worked with a lot in Scotland, he used to say, "You want a gentle dram?" He would just wave his hands around and say that. And what he meant was, avoid the new oak, because that can become really aggressive and dominant. I will say, I just pulled a sample and it was really tasty. So
I mean,
there's always exceptions.
Have you ever had the one I know that's been a recent real big hit in terms of new charred oak is the Paul John Methuna?
Yes. That was lovely. Yep.
Yeah. It was, I remember there was a tasting I went for. There were 11 different Paul John whiskeys, and I was sitting at a table with like 11 or 12 people who'd never really had whiskey before. And at the end of the tasting, everyone was like, "What's the favorite?" And everyone literally just said the Methuna.
Love it.
I think the new charred oak barrels have something interesting going on. So I was going to ask that question. So that's cool that you guys are doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the last part of the question was my background. I was an English major. I double majored and did political science on the side. I loved food and drink and traveling, and that was kind of my passion on the side. I was trying to figure out just what to do. There was a long program at UVA for getting my doctorate in English Lit, and I realized I wasn't ready. And I was part of an online book club, and one of the guys was like, "Hey, there's this new distillery opening up. We should check it out and have a meeting there." And I went to their website, and they mentioned American single malt. And I was like, "It's going to be bourbon. It's going to be bourbon." And then I saw, oh, hang on. And I loved single malts because, again, that sense of place, you're traveling. It was always my go-to, just to really experience all the flavors. And I got so excited because at that point I'd had 3 American single malts. The first one was the St. George Spirits. I thought it was so cool, but it was such a limited release. And I just don't know what happened, but I'd immediately written a cover letter, and it was just like, "Hey, this is my background." In college, I worked at the Virginia Aquarium, so I helped to run admissions there. And so I talked about that. I talked about dogs, I think, but I threw in my resume and thought, I'll volunteer on weekends or something while I maybe do this doctorate program. And they wrote me back almost immediately and said, "Hey, we want to build a tour and tasting program, and you sound like you'd be perfect. Can we meet with you?" So before I knew it, April 2015, our visitor center was literally a hole in the ground. I got to be there to watch everything come together. I picked out railings for the visitor center, and then I was hiring the team. And then I was watching the Dunnage Style Cask House get the roof on. It was a wonderful blur. I did the Bourbon Trail, kind of a behind the scenes tour, meeting as many people as I could. Got to meet some really great mentors, trained a little bit, went to Scotland, did everything I could. And that's my story for creating the visitor center. Had a great time doing that and realized I needed to be very educated myself, but also educate the team. And so next thing we knew, we had agencies to train and distributors to train. And then I needed to be on the road doing tastings. And then I needed to learn how to grade the casks because, you know, that was the next step. So Nancy Fraley met me and we did a tasting together, and she asked a question and I answered, and she looked at me and she said, "You have a good palate." And I'd never thought about that before. And she said it enough times that people started to listen, and I got to do seminars with her, train with her, worked at Iron Root Distillery. That's how I met the awesome people at Wanderback. So it's been a really fun journey. And
Nancy does Joseph Magnus as well, right?
Yep, she sure does. Yeah. So she adopted me into her lineage. She has picked 3 mentees to be part of her line. And so I got to be one of them, and still pinching myself about that because she's brilliant and she's so humble. She's the nicest person that you'll ever meet, but she knows her stuff and she works harder than anybody else to really know what she's doing. So yeah, she's a legend. So I'm very lucky.
And sorry, is that a North by Northwest Last Jedi mashup poster behind you?
Yes.
Okay, I like it. I like that a lot.
Huge Star Wars and a huge Hitchcock fan. So there are a lot of weird things hidden in my house, including in my liquor cabinet. An answer of the Star Wars or weird movie variety.
I like that mashup though. That's I give you a lot of props. That's very cool.
I own every Hitchcock film, and I've seen most of them in theaters. And the Scotch Trooper bottle, yes. So my dear friend Brett passed away recently, but he was this Instagrammer who did a lot of photos with Star Wars action figures, and he fell in love with the cuvee cask, and he got a sample of it from a friend, and he messaged me and was like, "Hey." So he came and visited us quite a bit. I met up with him before he died in Georgia, and we did a special release in his honor. He picked out the cask, so it was our first single cask cuvee. It wasn't cask strength, but it was still delicious. And yeah, it was.
Are you talking about Scotch Trooper?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really good guy. I was talking to his wife Tiffany last week, and they're some of the strongest, coolest people. So he left a beautiful, beautiful legacy. And if you guys have Instagram accounts, you should check out Scotch Trooper Legacy. And just, yeah, he and I became friends almost immediately, just because we were both such geeks. And I have a long Facebook message thread to look back on with all the memories, and he'd ask me to send movie lists and things. So yeah, whiskey brings people together, and he used to talk about the whiskey fabric. So I think that's exactly what it is. I love whiskey for a lot of reasons, and the people, it's a big part of it.
Agreed.
You guys ready for the port cast? Cheers to that. Yeah. The first whiskey we ever released was our VHW port cask. So this was well said earlier, but I'll reiterate it. Yep. A lot of distilleries have pressure to release a White Dog, a Lightning. Go ahead.
We're not doing the Courage and Conviction.
The flagship. I skipped it. I was so into Brett. Let's do the flagship first.
Sorry.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you. The flagship is the bringing it all together. So you just had it deconstructed. Now you get to put it together. And in fact, if you've got any other remainders from your other whiskeys, you could play blender too and see. But my ratio is roughly 50% of our whiskey aged in former bourbon casks, 25% aged in sherry casks, 25% aged in cuvee wine casks. So all brought together. And so, yeah, this is our flagship. That's our recipe right there. And again, it's the complexity. That's what we're striving for, something that tells a really cool story. And for consistency, whenever I'm doing a batch, I save, oh, that's beautiful. I like that. I always save a bit of the former batch to use as kind of a start for the next blend. So every batch is a little bit different, but you should definitely have the same consistent notes through.
Amanda, I think in a lot of tastings that we'll do and have done, they would start with the flagship. How come you don't?
I thought of it as making a cake. And so you better know the ingredients before you put it all together. So you're kind of tracing through my steps. I didn't, I've definitely done some where I do start with the flagship, but I figured I'd put you guys in my brain and you could see how it works. That way, if you did want to play blender and try your own ratios after you got to know the pieces, you could do that. I just thought
I like that. It makes more sense to taste the component stuff and then taste the finished product.
That's how my brain works. Yeah. Now, I think for people who don't have palettes, it would make sense to just start with the flagship and get more complex. But because it's all the same ABV, I figured you wouldn't be like, oh, this is so much more robust. My palate's blown out. So yeah. But yes, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on what is your favorite, if it is the flagship or if it's an individual component. Oh, I love the poll.
Oh, look at that.
I'm excited now.
They're going to be similar to the single cask strength cuvee. Is there going to be maybe
This is one of his little silly kind of ones that I go, really?
Yeah, I mean, but is there going to be a cask strength release of the flagship maybe too?
Ooh. So right now on the calendar, I have next year cask strength of the Oloroso, then cask strength of the former bourbon casks, then the PX, then the Fino. The next year, we could potentially do flagship cask strength. I hadn't thought of it until right now. The tricky thing is, with single cask, it's individual barrels. So we would need it to be a conglomeration of, so I might work that into a capstone release.
Oh, we'd be happy with that, Amanda.
Yeah.
We like what you're doing, so that would be epic.
And Amanda, remember that when you're doing the allocations between the different markets, we have 40 million people. So
love it.
We're not the state of California, we're the country of California.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, if you want to call it the Beno Gopal special, flagship cask strength release, that's totally fine by me. I'll give you full permission for that.
And you're going to be able to
I love
provide a
it.
profile picture to go on the tater sticker?
Just saying. So in that note, you mentioned, and I guess I was confused by something. I thought the sherry was Fino, but then you mentioned both Oloroso and PX. Sorry, where do they come in again?
I use all three.
Oh, you do use three for the sherry.
Yes.
Okay.
So
and is there a ratio between the three?
I've changed it up every single batch that I've done. So I started out using a little bit more Oloroso for the first batch. It was just really showing well at this cast that I looked at, and I was like really attached to a couple extra barrels there. But the most recent one, I did a little more Fino. So yeah, every batch can be a little bit different on the ratios. So actually the first batch I did was almost exactly 2, 2, and 2 of Fino, Olo, and PX. It was very close.
Interesting.
Yeah. I love all your thoughts. I'm enjoying reading the notes. I like the long finish. I like a little bit of ginger spice coming through. So it's always disappointing if you drink a whiskey and go, what was that again? I forgot. You need something that leaves an impression.
So going forward, we're really excited about you talking about doing some cask strength or some blends of cask strength, like you said, marrying them together. That sounds really super exciting. I'm all in for that. Going back to some of your core expressions, and when you have to source different barrels that are very expensive and they come from different places. And I know you said you were doing the shave, the toast, and the char, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you think going forward, the delineation of batches, like whatever you call it, whether it's your cuvee or it's your CNC, the batch numbers are going to change because, like you said, your ratios are all going to be a little bit different?
Yes. So
Okay.
for our American blended malt line, we do batches by number. So every bottling is a different batch. For Courage and Conviction, every batch is named after somebody who inspires us. So yeah, the way it works, I'm building a batting house right now because we needed more space. We have 10,000 liter stainless steel tanks. That's 2,600 gallons in each of them. And the way that I do what I do is I go through and grade the barrels throughout the year. And Nancy had this ABC ranking where C barrels are very foundational in their flavors. B has a little bit more complexity. And A is like this really unique thing that stands out. I took that, built onto it with number system and pluses and minuses for nuance. And so I'm going through and selecting these barrels, and C is not like a C grade, like you're getting this, meh average. It's no, this is what you'd expect. It's foundational. So for example, bourbon cask, well, it's got some good light fruit notes and some barrel spice. Whereas an A, it's like, whoa, okay, that is tropical banana coming through. Where did that isoenol come from? So different notes kind of make it stand out. And when it came time for me to start putting together the first batch, what we did is we selected different barrels that we thought, okay, this should work well together. And we had different vats for each type. So we put all of the bourbon cask aged whiskey in one, all the sherry casks in another, and started playing with the ratios there of the different types, all the cuvee in another. And then we had this other tank that we started to pull into and make our adjustments. And we also, of course, start reducing. So it's this tweaking time of really months getting it to where we want it to be. And that was that first process of, we've got these individual, sort of like a reverse Solera, where we realized we'll never empty those casks or those vats. We'll just keep topping them off. And that's been really fun to always have enough to work with to really build these really large batches. So from there, we built out more tanks so I can do more projects and start tweaking. So for example, this sherry cask, we have Oloroso, Vino, and PX separately, and we start playing with the ratios and bringing it all together.
So a question about, because you said you're expanding and you're growing, and I can definitely see that that's going to be something important. Are you focused mainly on the domestic market, the United States, North America? Are you looking at expanding into Europe, into Japan? Because those, particularly Japan, I would think that your product would be so well received because of their love of single malts.
Yes. We plan to stay domestic for our first years of, getting started, maybe our first decade even, but we had a lot of inquiries. And secret, we just shipped 5 pallets to South Korea of our whiskey. They ordered a pallet of every single type. So our flagship, each of the line extensions, and they want more. So
yeah, you just kicked open the door.
I think so.
They know quality. Yes, Koreans, I think that they exceed the Irish in their drinking abilities.
We were stunned how much they wanted, and we were like, well, we'll pace ourselves. Can we start with this? So yeah, we're kind of stunned at how much interest there is in several different countries. So we've been like, we're going to pace ourselves and make sure we have
cask strength, your barrel strength, domestic, and like I said, the country of California. That we'll be happy. We'll support you.
I like that plan. Yeah, we have so much scale. That's the exciting thing. Being independently owned is really cool too. It gives us a lot of freedom to be creative and playful, and the team feels really invested. So yeah. Oh, okay, that was really fun seeing your thoughts on all the different ones. I change all the time. It's like asking me to pick my favorite child. I think the bourbon cask is interesting because it's a chance to see the barley shine through and the fermentation shine through. But honestly, the more robust sherry and cuvee speak to my flavor profile a little bit more. And the flagship, I love it. And I like how it can open up. I'll sit down with it and then like 30 minutes and I'll be like, wow, that chocolate's really opening up, or I'm really getting these great nutty notes. Special releases we do twice a year. And so typically it's November for one and then spring for the other one. So kind of 2 things to look forward to. Occasionally we do a single barrel release where all the proceeds go to a local charity. So that's distillery only. We've done one for first responders. We've done one for the local SPCA. We've done one for the local soup kitchen, community funds. So that's a fun project too.
You ever do them for whiskey clubs?
We have done full, but those were charities, so all the proceeds go to them. But yeah, we have done a couple single cask picks. So if you want to, let us know.
David, how many members do you guys have right now?
Almost 1,800.
1,800. There you go.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I love it. It's just really exciting to find people who love single malts and are excited to talk about it because, yeah, everybody in the US is really comfortable with bourbon and rye, and being able to come on the scene. Next time I come, we should talk history if you guys are interested, because the story is, yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, no, we would like to be able to do that. Also, I think that one of the things that Vadim has done and been instrumental in is bringing us from those core, what we call the middle lane and the big warm blankets of the robust bourbon, but once you get into kind of finding out more about, scotches and Irish whiskeys and things that are being done in Japan, you start to really kind of broaden you look at things a lot more differently, and you can appreciate the subtleness of things, a lot of things. So I'm just really surprised how many people, including myself, have really become fans of single malts. So I think that there's a growing kind of appreciation. I think that what I'm seeing in a lot of places that people are looking for new, different, that it's not going to be a, punch you in the face with a bunch of, brown sugar and whatever. They want some of the subtleties. I have my center lane. I'm finding that more and more every day, but I do find that I really enjoy a lot of single malts tremendously. So I think I'm seeing that because I think that there's going to be a development of the palate of the United States, and it's continuing to develop and kind of expand, particularly with all these different sort of expressions and the good work, people such as yourself are doing.
Thank you. Oh, that makes me so happy.
It's every single day, bourbon and rye drinkers are finding American single malt. And I think a big part of it is groups like this, tastings like this. And, whether it's you read an article or you see something on YouTube, and whoever the distiller is that's making the bourbon or rye that you love, when that person interviewing them asks that question, what do you drink? I don't know how many times I've heard, well, we're distilling a little bit of single malt for ourselves, just for me and the buddies, da 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 da. And, but it's amazing. And one of these days we're going to bottle it. Well, guess what? That was 5 and 10 years ago, and they're now bottling it. So it's amazing. And American single malt, I know you guys, and yes, I'm making a huge generalization right now, so I apologize, and no hate mail, please. I know this is a bourbon and rye group, and that's the first love. And I know, Jane, but it's one of those things. I'm generalizing. I'm the majority, but I know that you're finding other things. I mean, didn't you guys do a mezcal tasting the other day? I mean, come on, I get it, but American single malt, unbelievable, and this is one of the brands right here.
Thank you. I love mezcal too, and I have to say, the port cast finish that we're going to wrap on, I do a red, white, and blue whiskey cocktail with it every year, and I put a little mezcal float on top for that extra smoke note. So it's my pair with barbecue drink. So yeah, it's a fun world to play with for sure.
We're gonna need that recipe for sure.
It's on our website. Yeah, I will find it and post it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
As we get ready for our last dram of this tasting, I do want to ask everyone to hop back on camera, get Brian back in. He ran away for a second. Just want to say thank you. This is really special and delicious, and I'm glad we can get you in the room with us. You, like I said, Anna speaks volumes, and this was her brainchild. She said, "You've got to get these guys in. Their stuff's really good." So I'm excited we can make this happen. It was a couple of months in the works, and I'm glad it can come to fruition. So thank you very much for spending the evening with us. Thank you for sharing this awesome liquid with us. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Anna, too. Like, what a great world it is with so many cool whiskey people.
Hashtag whiskey fabric.
Absolutely. One of my favorite things about whiskey too is the memories it creates. I always remember, the first time I had a certain whiskey, where I was, who I was with. I love that.
Is the picture okay, Vinny?
Yeah, it came out well.
Or lack of memory sometimes.
That was either really good night or a really bad night.
Yeah.
The nice thing is I don't remember.
When was the last time we did that, Brandon? I can't remember. It's been too long.
It's been a while, my friend. A cigar should be involved.
Yep.
Bino and cigars? I don't think he likes cigars. He's not a big cigar smoker.
So for the port cast finish, this is the first whiskey we released. Our idea was, well, we're still working on aging our single malt, but we need something to get people excited, and we need to tell our story. So that's what it is. Our label right there, you've got the split V. And so Old World whiskey, what we did is we brought over whiskey that had already been aging, mostly 12 years and older. The youngest we brought over was 6 year, from a distillery in Scotland. And we married it with our own younger distillate. So it's roughly 50-50. And our whiskey has gotten a little older, of course, over the years. So we're talking 3-4-year-old right now that goes in there. And you guys have had your share of blended whiskeys. Johnny Walker, Dewar's, Famous Grouse, those have 30 to 40 different whiskeys going into every bottle. Most of it's grain whiskeys made in column stills. So we call this a marriage. And what
So
really
it's a blended malt, Amanda? Sorry, this is a single malt from a distillery in Scotland.
Yes, one
blended
single malt
with-
meeting our single malt brought together and then finished. So we moved the two whiskeys in for really what's the second maturation in true port barrels from Portugal, but also some local port style wine casks from local wineries. So you get a real sense of the Virginia climate. So we released this in 2015 and it immediately won World Whiskey Awards Best in Category. And it's won every single year since. So this is my go-to for cocktails, from Black Manhattans to Sazeracs to Old Fashions, you name it. It goes great with food, but also I love it as a neat sipping whiskey. And yeah, there are 10 little spikelets on the barley in the middle. Virginia's the 10th state, and the least amount we've ever finished it is 10 months. So usually it's, years plus of finishing. And
So it's 10 months in the port?
Minimum.
Minimum,
Yep.
okay. And
Yep.
do we know which bodega or house?
Yep, JD is
Okay.
in Portugal. Yep. Yeah, I like this one because it's kind of an entry for people who are used to single malt scotch or maybe something more robust like a bourbon. It kind of has that flavor profile to play with. You might get a little hint of peat. The distillery we work with in Scotland, we keep proprietary. The idea there is if we ever want to switch, we don't want people hung up on that. And also, we want them to focus on the fact that it's an American whiskey, even if it is blended. You finished in bottle here in Virginia. But they source some of their water through a peat bog. So if you were nosing it, tasting it, and thought, oh, is that peat? You're spot on. Just not a whole lot.
The peat is coming from the water?
Yes. Yep.
Water runs over and through peat.
And that's a hint about what distillery it is.
Mhm.
Yeah. So a couple different sources that we could work with, but this is the one that, again, with our ties, it just made a lot of sense. And it's
Courage and courage.
courage and courage.
That's what I meant.
Or conviction,
The bourbon, sherry, and cuvee are all courage and conviction.
True. So flagship, CNC
Yeah.
flagship works, whatever you want to
Yeah,
put.
all those are courage and conviction.
This one I'm really conflicted on, Vadim, and I would have really enjoyed a sort of category that said cuvee and CNC, those two, because they have such subtle nuance difference that I don't want to say I like one over the other. And then you go over to this port finish and you're just like, oh, that's like a completely different kind of drink and experience and palate, the taste. I'm like, it depends on my mood. Right now I like those two, the cuvee and the CNC, and I'm like, but I know that would there be an evening that I just totally focus on the port finish, particularly if I'm doing what that son of a bitch Justin is doing outside on his porch with a frickin' cigar. You show off, a big cigar flexor. So that would be fantastic. These are really spectacular. So anyway, that was just my soapbox.
Love it. Some of you were talking about the cider cask finish earlier, and that's the same story right there. It's the blended whiskey, two single malts coming together. We have given a lot of our used barrels to local cideries. So Potter Ciders right here in Charlottesville. There's Buskey Cider in Richmond. And when they're done using our whiskey barrels to age their cider, they give them back to us. And so then we use them to finish our whiskey, which has been really fun. We've also given a lot of our barrels to local breweries. So 3 Notched here in Charlottesville is done a wee heavy style, and we've taken them. And if you're lucky, you can find our limited release. It's a brewer's batch. So that's been fun as well, just to be able to get creative with these limited releases. And yeah, we have people who are always emailing us, can we get your cask? So we try to find really cool places to collaborate with. And the cider cask, on the nose, it's like green apple, green pear. a little honeysuckle and toasted pecan, but on the palate is more cinnamon baked apple. And Whiskey Advocate ranked that in their top 20 whiskeys of 2018, and we sell out of it a lot. So if you can find it, snag it, because it is hard to keep on the shelves. But I think the port is my favorite between the two, if I had to say.
So you're not allowed to say which Scottish distillery it is?
No, I'm not. But I'll tell you, it's either in the Highlands or Speyside region.
Does it start with an A?
No, it does not.
Okay, interesting.
Yep.
Were you going Ardmore on that?
I was going Ardmore on that. Yeah.
I knew you were.
Hmm.
Yeah, but there's actual peat in Ardmore. It's not just the water.
That's true.
Amanda, I gotta tell you, I'm guilty of the Brandon stereotyping. I'm a bourbon rye guy first, have been for a long time. We've done close to 100 of these, and it's true. We've done a couple of tequilas and mezcals. We've done a couple rums. We've done a couple other things, but we've mostly done whiskeys of some sort. And the kind of joke is that Vadim, because he loves single malt, is trying to bring us over to that side. And I texted him earlier.
It's no joke. He's trying to very hard.
But you're not the first American single malt, but I realized drinking this that American single malt is the gateway drug for bourbon drinkers to single malt, because there's just something about the way that it drinks is very bourbony. It has the fullness, it has it, but Farina, who's not on here, always talks about, and Qua, who's also not on here, also talks about how bourbon's only these notes and single malt's all these notes, and why don't we go for these notes? And the American single malt sort of gives me the oomph that I like in bourbon, but still somehow presents with all these notes and not just here. And it's, I am probably going to do what I haven't done in a while, which is buy a single malt or three. So
Wow.
this was really, really good, I gotta say. And on that note, if I go to is it better to go to Mash and Grape or just go directly through you guys to get the free shipping if it's over 100, which is 2 bottles, which why would I not do that? Because otherwise I'm sort of getting
Just go to a local store. Go to a local store in California and ask them to bring it in. That's your best
That's what
bet.
Brandon wants you to do, because that's going to help.
I'll do both.
There is a liquor store 2 blocks from you right now if you live in California. So
I'll go to Beverage Warehouse and beg them. No worries.
you know, Jordan, I'll tell you what. I used to work for Jim Beam for over a decade, and all I drank was bourbon. And what really got me into Scotch and single malts, besides having Lafroig in our book, obviously, but what I realized is the distillers that are making bourbon and rye, I look at it as like a painter. And those 4 or 5 grains that they have on their palette are different colors. And they get to paint these beautiful pictures with 4 or 5 different colors. And that picture is the whiskey, obviously. And then you look at master distiller making a single malt, and they are painting a beautiful picture as well. It's just as beautiful, if not more beautiful, but they're using 1 color paint. Can you imagine painting a beautiful picture with just all red or all gray or yellow or whatever? And every single one of those whiskeys tastes different. And none of them are even, it's so amazing what they can do with that 1 grain. That's what hooked me on single malts.
Well, thank you for the high praise, Jordan. That's really encouraging. It's definitely an uphill climb because people aren't as familiar with the American single malt category. So yeah, to echo what Brandon was saying, thank you for sharing that love and getting it out there, because it is a little bit of a fight. So just get that recognition and placement. Our website's a great resource. So if you do want to use it to find, it'll even link you to Mash and Grape. You can pick a ship nationwide option, but also, yeah, find those local stores. Use that whiskey finder on there too to see what's available. And they might only have 1 product, so you can ask them to bring more in, whatever you want. But yeah.
I think not coincidentally, the last 2 or 3 single malts were also American from our tasting. So I think you guys just did it for me. So yeah.
So cool. So cool.
I mean, speaking of, we were saying, just to put sort of a pin on it, when the cast strength, stuff comes out, so we can make sure we don't miss out. Are we going to be like notified ahead of time by somebody, Brandon or Amanda or someone, or do we just have
or
to
a newsletter?
Amanda, do you think they're interested in the single malt? I mean, in the cast strength? I'm not sure.
I'm kind of getting the feeling they are.
Yeah, no, I'll
Yeah.
make sure you guys know ahead of time. I'll make sure that I mean, depending on how much we get, it may be something where we go through, 2 or 3 retailers. I don't think there'll be a lot of it, obviously. But depending on that, I'll let you guys know who's got it and when and all that good stuff.
Brandon,
Very
our new retail partner for everything we're doing is Jeff with OC Bottle Shop. He's a huge fan of yours. We're a huge fan of his. So we'll make sure he brings some of these in. When you get them in, let me know. I'll have a chat with him and we'll be sure to buy whatever he brings in.
Where's OC Bottle Shop?
10 minutes for me. I think he's in the city of Cyprus.
It's Cyprus, which is basically Anaheim. And obviously we'll make sure that he gets some. I've got to be, diplomatic enough that there will be more than just one store that gets it. But
Village Liquor.
definitely
and,
get some.
Locking you out of Flint Ridge because it's Lori, Amanda, myself, Tim, and Jacqueline. We're all really close to that place, and he's really supportive of us. Just I think that Jeff would be. So I think
Amanda, are you going to be coming to the market at all?
Yes, I'm supposed to be there this fall. I think September, October, and November in Cali. So yeah, I would love to come visit you guys.
Well, bring a mask. Everything's shutting down again.
Yeah. We were really quick to get vaccinated. Charlottesville's got the highest vaccination rate in the state. So we were hopeful. Just keeping my fingers crossed.
No, I would think that'd be fantastic. I want to kind of add about the comments that Brandon made about bourbon having like maybe 4 colors with the different sort of things. I always kind of looked at single malts or, that kind of expression, the way that you're kind of, and I've always, because bourbon is now getting into barrel finishing, where you have different brands that are starting to do what single malt scotches have done for 100 years or however long it is. And I think that that's where the single malts and what you're doing is like picking up I would say that you have an infinite number of colors to work with the grains, but going into the yeast and the combinations of the barrels, because you don't need too many factors to start, sort of an exponential sort of growth of your sort of flavor profiles that you're dealing with. And I think that that's what I've gotten from this virtual tasting, what you're talking about with different batches and different things. The painting that you're going to be doing with every expression is going to change. It is going to be different. And I think that's what's exciting about a brand, exciting about listening to what you're talking about, because it's a relationship that somebody could have with you and kind of be with you for a very, very long period of time. And because it's always going to be a little bit different. It may be in this lane,
and yet all still one grain or one color paint.
Yeah, but it's the finishing that I think that the combinations that I think is where the skill and the artistry comes from. And we've experienced that with people who do batching with other big brands. And I've come to appreciate the difficulty and how difficult that is. So good job.
Thank you. It's extra challenging, I think, for bourbon distilleries because they're a little bit handicapped. It wasn't always the case that they had to age a new charred oak. But once the Coopers Guild really got that lobby out there and they had that, I think they struggle with the fact that they're playing against expectations. People are more informed now, so they understand that older isn't necessarily better. We were just talking about that. But because they are stuck using new oak, and then when they layer on that finishing on top of it, it can double down on the potential for over oaking and having that 2x4 in your mouth experience. So major kudos to those who are doing it well, because it is a challenge. This has been so much fun. I'm sure you guys want to get to dinner and things, but I am always available to talk whiskey, and you guys are so cool. So if you do want to send questions my way, my email is amanda@viadistillery.com. And if you're messaging Virginia Distillery on Facebook or anything, just say, hey, this is for Amanda, and the team will grab me. And yeah, are there results for the poll?
Yeah. So your whiskey's better than I, and you gauged our group pretty well. What do you think was the favorite expression of the night?
My guess was either the cuvee cask or the flagship. That was my guess.
Okay. And your guess is absolutely spot on.
I love it. I
Yeah,
love
the
it.
cuvee is 60% and the flagship is 40%, and that's all.
Wait a
the
sec,
votes.
I voted for the port cast. Why does it say I didn't answer this question?
Were you on, you didn't answer this one? You might
I
have stepped
did.
away.
Could have, I
Um,
clicked on it. Oh, whatever.
We also did a poll of, tell us all the ones you liked, and that one is a lot more colorful. So I'll share the results now. That one's a much prettier chart.
Yeah, look at that.
There we
So this
go.
was, I think, our first time doing a select all that apply. So this was a multiple
I love
choice.
it.
Thank you for doing that, Vadim.
Yeah.
Very
it's
cool.
I mean.
And
every
would you
single thing we
announce what
tried
the
today.
results were? Because this is going to be recorded and the.
Oh, yeah.
people watching it will not
So
know.
when it was a select all, essentially 83% of the people liked the cuvee, 67% liked the port, 58% liked the Courage and Conviction flagship, 33% voted for the sherry, and 25 voted for the bourbon. So those are.
I didn't
not
know I could
exclusive.
choose more than one. I would have picked them all.
It only says choose all that apply.
Oh, I don't read those things. I just,
Daniel doesn't follow directions. If you don't know
It's
that.
not
line,
just you,
I
trust
wouldn't-
me. I work with attorneys all day long. They don't read either.
I just sip, nod, and smile.
And look pretty. Don't
That's
forget to
that's
look
why we
pretty.
have you. There you go. You make the room look pretty. I appreciate it. We're excited for this. This has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Amanda. This has been a real pleasure to get to know you and try some of your whiskeys. We're excited for what you have in the works. Can't
Sure.
wait to try some of your cast strength expressions, because if it's
Absolutely.
this amazing at
And new make.
46%.
So either when you come in the fall, definitely bring like new make with you, or just if you could send us some, that would be amazing.
Love
Well,
it.
we'll do this again with the group. And
That'd be great.
Yeah, let's set something
I'll
up
make-
when you're here in town. We'll
yeah, I'll
find
make
a
sure of
venue.
it.
Let's do a dinner
Perfect.
someplace.
Sounds like a blast.
Awesome.
Thank you, Amanda.
My
Thanks,
pleasure.
everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.